wave of murder which is sweeping the eastern third of the nation is being committed by creatures who feast upon the flesh of their victims.
George Romero created a subgenre of political horror, and no one at that time was doing it.
Audiences are so conditioned when it comes to horror movies to seeing, the monster, the guy going through the transformation, or the guy with the big head. And we were conditioned for that. And then all of a sudden, here's this filmmaker who takes these ideas and says, we don't need that to be scary. There's enough real stuff to be afraid of here. And I really think that resonated with generations, and it still does.
The first film I saw George's, of course, was Night of the Living Dead.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
It was, just a shocking experience. It was the verite style, which I'd never seen in horror before.
If you look back at Night, one thing that's striking about it is people really don't realize how gory and violent it actually is because it's in black and white.
The stark black and white. I know it was probably done for budget reasons, but it just all came together to make this wonderful work of art.
You have the same intestine pulls, you have the same feasting. It's all there, but because you don't see that color red, something about it seems not as visceral.
And the fact that he cast real people, which really informed a lot of directors in terms of learning one of the key elements of great horror filmmaking is that when you have the possibility of the unexpected, and when you don't have a star in the lead, anything can happen.
They're coming for you. Look, there comes one of them now.
The first film that I saw of George Romero's was Dawn of the Dead.
What happened with Dawn of the Dead is the movie was so well received and people put it up on such a pedestal that anything that came after it could not have lived up to it.
Day of the Dead, when that film came out, it tanked. Nobody, the people that wanted Dawn of the Dead didn't get Dawn of the Dead. And that's why we're talking about the hardcore fans. They didn't get that.
George is a very opinionated guy, but he doesn't force his opinions on anyone. But he puts them down on film, and you either like them or you don't. And that's his thing with Hollywood, too, because Hollywood has forever had this kind of love-hate affair with George because he will not conform to their ideals. He won't make their movies. George will only make his movies.
After Land of the Dead, Romero almost went into a shell again, after after working in the Hollywood system again, because I think he just needed that, he needed to dip his toe into that pool again, just to see if anything's changed almost. And I think that once he went into the water, he got terrified.
Certainly his films were informed by the time because the 70s were a very, politically disrupted period.
That particular generation has a lot to say. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of unrest, so that became ingrained upon him, and in turn it became ingrained upon his films.
There was no overt politics in horror up until George.
He's basically holding up a mirror to society and saying, this is us, and then through that, you crack that mirror and there's different fractures and different themes of all of our lives and what's going on.
He is a regional filmmaker, and certainly his first 10, 11 movies were all shot in Pittsburgh. Not everybody comes from Pennsylvania, and it's a different kind of place. It's different than horror movies shot in LA or even Texas, and yet he did it, film after film. My family actually happens to come from Pittsburgh. And so, after I started watching the Romero films, I looked at Pittsburgh in an entirely new light.
I think George is so on the cutting edge that sometimes it takes a little while for the rest of us to catch up with him.
Not only is he a regional filmmaker, then not only is a horror filmmaker, but it's almost like in every one of his early films, the conscience of the film was portrayed by an African American. In Dawn of the Dead, his hero was a black man. In the Crazies, the conscience of the story is the colonel, who's this black army colonel who is basically given orders to lay waste to the town, and it's not sitting well with him.
The original Crazies was made in 1973, and obviously under the shadow of Vietnam and the world in chaos and the country in chaos based on that reality, and it very much was a response to the government's and the military's involvement in this war.
Now that we have several decades to look back on them, you see that the themes that he was exploring then are still relevant today.
The Crazies is really George being a little bit even more heavy-handed and letting us know that, there's shit going on right now that we need to get a handle on, or else there's going to be heavy consequences to pay.
The thing that's really great about those George Romero movies is that they're clearly about something. He really is dialed into something that was going on at the time, and this movie still feels very relevant.
When the Crazies came out, there was such a counterculture, F the government kind of thing going on, that he was like, you know what, let me make the government the bad guys.
Like all great filmmakers, he's working in this niche, which is horror. And yet, at the same time, he's trying to express himself. And I shouldn't be speaking for George, but just as a fan watching his movies, I can tell you that he's making a political statement with this movie. And it's a fascinating political statement about the government just abandoning this town, essentially, and letting mayhem rule.
With the Crazies, he just upped the ante a little bit. He said, okay, now these aren't supernatural creatures. These are your aunt, these are your uncle, these are your friend, these are your parents. These are people who have turned because of something someone else does.
I rewatched The Crazies just as a refresher, and I sat there with my jaw on the floor because it had been at least like maybe 5 years since I had seen the original Crazies, and I went, holy shit, he was like a Nostradamus of horror. I mean, he anticipated everything.
I think the new version of the Crazies is going to work just because of the era that we're in now, because of what we have to deal with.
Times couldn't be better for a horror film like this.
You got all these flus, you got H1N1, you got this, you got that. Does it seem so far-fetched that something's going to happen to make us all go batshit nuts? Not really.
The whole H1N1 thing broke out and everybody was talking about it. It was all over the news, as it always is. I went, okay, now this is a test of the Crazies. Let's see how the government handles this. And at the beginning you're like, okay, great, they got everything handled, they're already working on a vaccine, there's other countries getting involved, and then you get news, we don't have enough. And you're like, holy shit. Again, it's Romero, Romero knows.
For a remake to work, you have to bring something new to the table while still honoring the source material.
The Crazies remake story is so strong. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the sense that you can keep remaking an idea like that and it'll keep becoming, a very in the here and now.
The Crazies is one of those stories that could remain timeless because there's something about that happening. I mean, it could have happened back then, it could happen now, it could happen 2 years from now.
Horror is eternal. I mean, it ebbs and it flows. There are periods where it's in vogue and periods when it's not. Right now, we're kind of in a wave when horror has been very popular.
I think we're living in a time where it's like Universal did their Universal Monsters, and then Hammer came along and went, we're going to punch this up a little bit and take those monsters and do it our way. I think, again, we're now in that next generation where those guys, our guys are now saying, let's take the modern boogeymen that we grew up with and punch them up a little bit. And it's safe, it's familiarity, that always works in Hollywood.
George, I don't think he's ever played anything safe. You don't know where he's gonna go, that's one of the most brilliant things about him is you'll think he's gonna do one thing and then all of a sudden he's doing something completely different. He loves experimenting. Do I think he's going to play it safe and just make zombie movies? Absolutely not.
We've got so many problems now, and I think one that he could possibly tap into, which almost seems like more Oliver Stone territory, is the financial system, But Romero would find a way to somehow turn that on its ear and make it horror.
As a filmmaker, he is our conscience.
George Romero stands as an icon of the horror world. In some respects, his career is almost like Orson Welles. I mean, where he came out of the box and he made some of these seminal motion pictures. Hollywood made all kinds of money off of the films, and then they pretty much abandoned him. But unlike Orson Welles, he didn't turn to acting or wine commercials. George has just kept at it. He has continued to make movies, continued to make regional movies, continued to make independent movies, where he's doing the movies that he wants. And he's really somebody all of us can admire.
He finds new ways to do things, like just when you think you've seen it all, he'll pull something else out of the fire. He's the most imaginative person I know.
Romero is a master of horror because he brings intelligence and entertainment to horror, and that's what I think as genre fans we always look for.
Nobody's like him. Nobody will ever be like him. Nobody could ever take his place.
He's an icon.